Welcome to Hire Power, the show where we cut through the noise and get real about hiring. I'm Kim Frost, founder of Frost Connections, and after 25 plus years in the search industry, I've seen what works and what absolutely doesn't. If you're a founder, CEO, VP, or HR leader who's tired of bad hires and ready to build a team that actually fits your culture and vision, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Hire Power. I'm your host, Kim Frost. A few weeks ago, we tackled the uncomfortable truth about giving tough feedback, how dancing around the issue helps no one, and how honesty, when delivered with compassion, is the greatest gift a leader can give you. So, how to give feedback that no one else will, and you as a leader really step up. So we're going to go a layer deeper. We're talking about leadership styles that work and what doesn't, and how the styles you choose shows up most clearly when it's time to deliver feedback. And I've got a great story from one of my clients, Robert, who finally gave feedback to an employee that no one else in the company had the guts to share. So let's talk about styles, the good, the bad, and the avoidant. Let's start with the truth bomb, because you know I love those. Your leadership style isn't defined by your job title. It's defined by what you do when things get uncomfortable. Here are 3 common leadership styles I see when it comes to feedback. First, the avoider. They tell themselves they're being kind by not giving tough feedback, but guess what? Avoidance creates confusion, erodes trust, breeds resentment on the team, and really ultimately never changes anything. And you're going to hear that in a few minutes from Robert. The second style, the bulldozer. No filter, no empathy, just brutal honesty. Their intent might be clarity, but their delivery causes damage and with high turnover. Then the last one, the coach. This is where you want to be. Coaches don't sugarcoat things, but they also don't steamroll. They frame feedback with purpose and invite growth. There's usually a story in there, and I'm referring to Ted Lasso, great example, but the coach is really the sweet spot. Okay, so let me tell you about Robert. He had pretty much grown up with the company, started on the ground floor, and worked his way to president, helping the company grow to a multi-million-dollar global leader. It wasn't always flowers and sunshine. The owner was an innovator, passionate, humble, an incredible philanthropist, however, at times challenging. When Robert stepped into the president role, the company had a very specific culture. You can read between the lines here. Robert grew from the owner, but also complemented his style to balance out the challenges and took best practices through those challenging times. The challenges didn't define Robert. When I met Robert, I fell in love with him. Okay, not literally, but he was and still is one of my favorite clients. Why? Because of his leadership style. Honestly, when candidates met with Robert, they fell in love with him too. Everybody wanted to work for him, even though this company had a reputation of being a very tough, specific culture. When we had to decline candidates, they still had such a positive experience because of Robert. Our firm hired a few direct reports to Robert. As we stay in touch with our candidates as well as our clients, the feedback that was consistent over the course of employment with this company was how much they respected, enjoyed, and admire Robert. I will never forget when we were talking, we were retained on a search, but Robert mentioned another employee that he may need help with because the employee was toxic. So here's the story. Robert had an employee, I will call him Jay. Jay had been with the company over 20 years, technically solid, knew the systems inside and out, but the tone, delivery, and attitude, well, that was a different story. Team members were frustrated. They vent to Robert constantly. He encouraged them to speak up, use peer reviews, and be honest. Well, you can probably guess what happened. They chickened out. The feedback never made it to the employee, but the complaints kept coming and the culture was really being impacted. So Robert did what real leaders do. He sat down with this employee and gave him the feedback everyone else was too afraid to say. So, Robert, I'd love for you to tell your story. Well, Robert, I'm so happy that you have joined me. You are my first podcast guest, by the way. And, I've always told you how much I admire and respect your leadership. So, one of the things that always stood out to me is the time that you told me you had a really poor performing employee that had been with you for years and how you tried to work with that person. So can you just set the stage a little bit and tell us what the issue was with this leader?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kim. I'm excited to be the first guest. Hopefully I set a high bar for everybody that follows, but we'll see about that. We had a manager who had been with the company for 20 years as a manager. And mostly he worked by himself. And I'm not going to describe what he did, but he mostly worked by himself. And slowly over time, he was given employees as the department grew. And we started to see issues with his leadership. More specifically, there was a lot of ego in his leadership. And with that ego came a lack of ability to listen to others' feedback. And then we started noticing this was starting to affect other departments. Departments were no longer wanting to work with this manager's department. And so I knew I needed to dig in and figure out exactly what's going on and can we fix this. We have a 20-year employee, really hard worker, an incredibly intelligent person, but it was impacting the team as a whole. So that's really where the story starts with this person is realizing they're having a larger impact that's beyond the work they're producing.
Yeah. And I talk about that a lot of, leading without an ego. And sometimes it's very difficult. What's funny is it sounds like that leader had an ego, which I think is hysterical because you as a leader do not have an ego, which again, I think makes you a great leader. So what was it that finally made you realize you had to step in and give the feedback directly to this employee?
Yeah, my first approach, Kim, was to have the people being affected communicate. And I only did this at the leadership level. I didn't expect a subordinate to bring it to the leader, but I had other managers, other peers bring their concerns to this leader. And so that happened, and I would touch base with the offending leader. And he told me, oh, no, they said everything's great. And I realized, and I think I already knew this, people aren't willing to be honest if it's going to make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give them the opportunity in their own words to express their frustrations with this leader. So that didn't work. He really only got positive affirmation back from these leaders. The ones that would tell me in my ear how terrible he was, he would only get positive affirmation. So that made us take a step back. It almost put us a step back. By going through that exercise. So that was our first attempt.
It's funny because I did talk about that in one of my episodes about, feedback doesn't have to be hard. It's really necessary to grow. So let me ask you this. So you had the other leaders try to give them the feedback. They didn't. They chickened out. So how did you actually prepare for that conversation with this manager? I mean, what did you have to do to make sure that you got the message across? He heard it, but then having him understand that, well, people were saying things that were negative, just didn't say it to his face.
Yeah. As I stated, this manager had an ego. One of the difficulties here were the complaining parties also had some ego. We had some very strong-minded leaders that were butting heads. And so I had to be very careful to wade through just the standard personality conflicts that we see in every workplace and really look at the core issue and say, okay, this isn't just about a personality conflict. This leader is being abrasive, disruptive, and really causing the organization harm. And so I really focused on having tangible, verifiable incidents that had occurred. And thankfully, he gave me all the evidence I needed because he had a run-in with my assistant. And my assistant was the nicest person in the world that wouldn't hurt anybody. And she left crying after a interaction with this manager. So I gathered several concrete examples and I scheduled a meeting with him.
Okay.
Yeah. So in that meeting, I was very honest and direct with him. I said, here is the exact things that have happened where you did X and this was the result. And I really focused on the overall team and the impact on the team, the fact that it's not just a personality conflict. Departments aren't getting things done because they will not come to your department to collaborate.
So this was impacting productivity.
Impacting productivity, it's impacting morale, because now here I am not doing anything about this disruptive manager. And so I laid that all out for him and I said, things have to change in order for you to continue to be employed. I was very upfront with him in the beginning. I said, I know you've been here 20 years, but if you are harming the organization, I can't have you. And he had a really hard time hearing that, especially because he got positive feedback from his peers. But I had to keep hammering it in because his ego was very thick and really showcasing to him that his behavior was harming others. And he went through the song and dance, oh, that's not what I want to do, and that's not what I intended. They misunderstood my intentions. And so then we had a lesson on perception and how perception is all that matters. And that, the content of your message is only as good as what's received. And so he said he understood and said he would make changes. But what I found, Kim, is he went and made a list of this checklist of things he was going to do. And he went through that checklist and he brought me that checklist. Hey, look, Robert, look what I did. I did X, Y, and Z. Are you happy now? Right? And I'm paraphrasing his words. And all he was setting out to do was either prove me wrong and or just make me happy by checking the boxes. And so I had to have another conversation with him and reiterate the fact that is not checking the boxes, isn't building a relationship. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, because with relationship, we get stuff done. And without those relationships, we're going to continue to operate in silos. And so I sent him back out to revisit. And this time I made him go meet with the other management.
Okay.
And for him to directly, again, ask for additional feedback based on what I told him the problem was. So now I've given him, here's an incident that happened. I want you to bring up that incident to that person and ask him how it made him feel.
Wow.
So he was very unwilling to do that in the beginning. And I told him it was non-negotiable. You do that or you're going to lose your job. And I'm not generally harsh, and I'm not harsh when I bring, it's just fact. Right. So he went out and did that, kind of the same result. People downplayed it and said, oh, well, it's really not a big deal. And so that's kind of where we left that. And so long story short, Kim, I kept seeing the same behaviors resurface. They were just more polished, right? It was more robotic. And again, robots don't build relationships. And it ultimately led to me terminating this employee after 20 years.
Wow.
Because he wasn't able to get past his ego.
And you really did try. What struck me though too is at one point you said there was a light bulb that came on him at one point, because you said he sat there with tears in his eyes.
Yeah, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, that was so key.
In the middle of this, one of the conversations, not the final, not the first conversation, it seemed like I got into his head because he really didn't want to be that way, and that was the perception I got from him. He really didn't want to be that way. And he was very he was upset at first that people would think negative of him, but I think this time he was really sad that people thought that about him. But that lasted for a very short time. The tears, I think, while they were real, they didn't last for very long.
So here's what I love about Robert's story. He didn't just protect the team, he respected the individual. This really was the core of Robert, being respectful even in situations when others may not have been respectful to him. He wasn't trying to be nice, he was trying to be real and respectful. And that's what leadership is. So, a couple things to think about. If nobody will say it, it's probably your job, especially if you're the leader. Delivery matters. Timing, tone, empathy, you can't fake that, but you also can't hide behind it. Lastly, and this is so important, the cost of silence is higher than the discomfort of speaking up. That's the math, always. So if you have someone on your team who's technically great, but culturally off, ask yourself, have I made it clear what's expected? Have I made it safe to speak honestly? And if everyone else is silent, what am I waiting for? As I reflect on my own growth, some of it came from hearing tough feedback. While it stung, it really helped me become who I am today. Leadership isn't about avoiding hard conversations. It's about stepping into the fire with courage and clarity. Next week, I'll flip the mic, how to receive feedback like a pro, even when it stings, because the best leaders are also the best learners. Until then, thanks for listening to Higher Power. I'm Kim Frost. See you next time. That's it for this episode of Higher Power. If you're ready to hire smarter, connect with me at frostconnections.com or at LinkedIn at Kim Frost. And if you've got something to say about today's episode, follow the show and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, hire smart, lead better, and remember, how you hire is who you become. See you next week. No fluff, just better hires.